Natalie Brunell and Peter Schiff recently got in a heated debate or a heated disagreement, let's say, on Fox Business News recently here. Now, I've not watched this interview clip yet. However, I'm going to be reacting to it real time. My first initial take on this discussion. Natalie Brunell, of course, is the Emmy-winning journalist and internationally known person, one of the main women in Bitcoin, advancing the Bitcoin mission. Peter Schiff, obviously, is one of the most famous gold bugs that is infamous, I think is probably a better word, for predicting Bitcoin's price crash. Peter Schiff could have bought Bitcoin back when it was, a few dollars. Now it's tens of thousands of dollars, and Peter Schiff still believes Bitcoin's going to crash. So this video is not to make fun of Peter Schiff, nor is it to idolize Natalie Brunell. I'm sure both of them have very legitimate arguments to make in this clip. Like I said, I've not seen it yet, though, so we'll see how logical they are. But ultimately, the point of making this video is hopefully to have you understand what the different sides of the debate are, and I'm all for supporting debate. Unfortunately, over the last year, I've had over half a dozen people I've tentatively scheduled friendly debates with on my YouTube channel. However, for various reasons, they've either dropped out, cursed me out, or just I've never heard back from them. So I love debate, I encourage debate, and I'm really glad to hear that Peter Schiff and Natalie Brunell were in this kind of debate. So without further ado, let's get right into this clip and analyze what's going on. So here we go. Let's press play.
You've been waiting for it, right? Well, let's hear the halving. It's upon us in the Bitcoin community. Let's just say they're champing at the bit. And why not? Take a look at that. I think this will be the fourth run, right? The prior three all saw strong rallies over the next 12 to 18 months. Let's bring in Coin Stories podcast host Natalie Brunell. All right, Natalie. So is there a chance, though, that when this initially happens, we could actually get the old buy the rumor, sell the news kind of thing?
Sure. I mean, a lot of this has been priced in, so I think we can expect short-term volatility as usual, but long-term, the price has been trending up, and we've actually never seen a new all-time high in a cycle prior to the next halving, so things can get a little spicy here.
We've got them on the chart here. I mean, so it's amazing. The first one, I mean, it's just absolutely, it's hard not to be enticed by what we're seeing here, again, over a certain period of time.
Yeah, the logarithmic chart is always really expressive of the fact that Bitcoin is just going up in one direction. But, a lot of people can get kind of confused. What is the halving? Because we've never had an asset.
There's some wonderful points there. I'd like to point out, I forget the host's name. I've seen him in a couple other clips. He's kind of a funny guy. He seems like a genuine guy, but he's got sneakers on. I think that's so funny with this nice blue suit to have those green and white sneakers on. I think it's hilarious. But I don't know if I've ever seen a logarithmic chart for Bitcoin on mainstream news. I don't think I've ever seen it on CNBC. I don't think I've ever seen it on Fox. So if, I know it's not common. This might be the first time. If it's not the first time, it's one of the first times. That is pretty remarkable. And that's really important. It's the same data, but it's a massive unit bias shifter. So see, with a linear scale, the problem with pricing Bitcoin in a linear scale is that you lose a sense of the price action of many orders of magnitude before. So if you look at Bitcoin price in a linear chart, well, once Bitcoin gets under kind of $1,000 or even more like $5,000, the volatility kind of seems like it fades away. And that gives a false impression that Bitcoin was flat and then it recently skyrocketed. If you're looking at a logarithmic chart, that's where this conversation becomes much more interesting. You can see clear cycles of boom and bust. You can see some sort of correlation with the halving. Correlation doesn't always mean causation. I think there's a legitimate argument there that perhaps the halving cycle is overblown. I do think that's a legitimate argument to make. Not necessarily I agree with that, but I'm always curious to learn about that. But whatever the case, the logarithmic chart shown on mainstream news, I think is very intriguing. It's a great place to start. So I don't know who's in charge of that, but I definitely think that helps people eliminate the unit bias. Even if you don't believe Bitcoin, even if you don't like Bitcoin, I think it's really important to view any asset that increases in this many orders of magnitude in a logarithmic chart. I don't think you can better understand a Ponzi scheme than by looking at a logarithmic chart. And I don't think you can better understand gold than by looking at it in a logarithmic chart. So I think that's really good. Thank you, Fox News, for doing that. I appreciate it. I also want to point out that just unit bias, we have lots of red at the bottom of the screen. We have a big red sign of the S&P 500, right? Humans are prey to emotions. I mean, please just keep in mind, as much as I just congratulated Fox News for having a logarithmic chart, everyone wants to give emotions, right? All my YouTube videos, I got the clickbait. All my stuff's clickbait. Fox is all clickbait. Everyone does. It's the only way humans react, right? And that's not, as long as the clickbait eventually is true and it's not misleading, then I think it's fine. But it's important to keep in mind that everyone is trying to get an emotional reaction out of you, right? Including Fox News. I mean, you can look clearly, they got, all caps, what to expect from the Bitcoin halving. They have PN and Big Red. They got Fox Business Alert. They have Fox Business Live, right? So they got lots of numbers, lots of big, so just keep that in mind that everyone is trying to prey your emotions. And so the important thing is to detach yourself from everything, and then you can just live your life. So Natalie, I think, is about to break down the halving. Let's see what she has to say.
That has this baked in reduction in the incoming supply regardless of the demand. Nice. But I really think it demonstrates the elegance of this programmatic monetary policy that really is an elegant set of rules with no rulers that we all engage in and participate in voluntarily. No one's imposing this on us. Right. Bitcoin is chosen by us, the people.
And this is one of the core value propositions of it, right? But I want to ask you about the last few days. Bitcoin's come down a lot. And so folks who are anti-Bitcoin are saying, hey, there you go. It was sold to us as a sort of a hedge against geopolitics. And as soon as something flares up, it collapses. What do you say to people like that?
Well, it's the fast money that's selling in and out of Bitcoin and creating this short-term volatility. The smart money and the permanent capital is seeking shelter in Bitcoin, and more investors are going to see it as this flight to safety, including when things get more and more uncertain and chaotic around us, because Bitcoin is the one thing that is actually certain and predictable. The halving is just another example of that.
Okay. All right. So again, I've not seen this clip before. Okay, that's the honest truth. I've not seen this clip before yet. I was intentionally not watching it on Twitter because I wanted to react to it. I literally just talked about emotions. I mean, look at the headline now. Bitcoin below 65K amid Mid-East tensions. I mean, come on, what are you doing? You're praying to, you're having a emotional stance for the people against Bitcoin, thinking they're proven right. For the Bitcoin bros, you're, trying to make them feel bad. You're also interjecting the Middle East tensions. I mean, you're just trying to prey on so many different emotions here. You got the big red down arrow, right? I mean, and again, I'm not saying that Fox News is immoral for doing that. I'm just saying that you got to keep in mind it's the nature of the business here. But yeah, and I understand the host's reasoning of this question. I also want to make clear I'm not assuming that each question the host is projecting is one that the host has himself. I think actually he understands Bitcoin a good bit. But the question he is posing is a question that people, I think, that are not intellectually all there, let's say, would ask, right? I think he's asking on the behalf of, being devil's advocate. But let's make clear, he just said, oh, Bitcoin, its main hedge was just going to protect against geopolitics. Is it still a hedge? Bitcoin just crashed a lot. Look, dude, Bitcoin's up 4x since the FTX crash, right? Like Bitcoin went from like 15, 18,000, whatever, to over 70,000, right? Like Natalie Brunell, like just a minute ago, talked about how Bitcoin has never had a nominal all-time high before the halving before. And that's happened. Not even when Bitcoin did a 100x in previous cycles did it hit an all-time high before the halving. It just did. And so if you're going to be concerned or panicked about short-term volatility in the course of a few days or the course of a week, you are not prepared for Bitcoin. In fact, you're probably not prepared for investing at all. I don't care if you're in gold. I don't care if you're in Bitcoin. I don't care if you're in real estate. I don't care if you're in cash. If you have a short-term mindset for a long-term thesis, you are shooting yourselves in the foot. You're going to lose money and you're going to be incredibly stressed in the process. So this is really important to mention that the whole premise of this question is Bitcoin crashed a lot. Is it dead? No. Bitcoin crashed 60% overnight with the pandemic lockdown in 2020. Is Bitcoin dead? No. It went from 4,000 to 40,000 twice, and now we're 50% above 40,000. Okay, please, people, stop having these irrational questions of is Bitcoin dead just because it went down in price. And likewise, that also is true of the upside. When Bitcoin goes up, people ask me, Luke, what happened with Bitcoin? Nothing's happened. When it crashes, nothing's happened. When it goes up, nothing happens. Like price is irrelevant. You're pricing Bitcoin in terms of political currency that in of itself is nonsensical. Okay, he is asking Natalie Brunell, he's asking her, so is Bitcoin dead? Because the political currency at which we're measuring Bitcoin from within is having potential clashes due to other political factions and other political nations around the world and their political currency barter systems conflicting with each other. It's nonsensical. It's like saying, oh, is the locomotive in trouble because the stagecoach companies for the horses are having battles with each other? They're two completely different technological paradigms. The reason that Bitcoin seems volatile when pricing it in terms of a political asset, of a political currency, especially when there's political turmoil between countries, which obviously I hate and I despise and I wish the conflict would stop. But, Like I just want to make that very clear. If you're pricing Bitcoin through a political lens, you can't logically criticize Bitcoin for being volatile precisely when that political lens is what's being volatile due to the reaction of other political lenses, right? So yes, the reason Bitcoin crashed is because some people, illogically, the short-term minded, or I like how Natalie put it with the what she describe it, the quick money, fast money. I forget what she said, but I think that's a great way to put it. I don't think I've heard that before, but yes, the quick money. Let's say, the people that are in and out, of course, they're going to go back to the U.S. dollar because they want stronger political energy in the face of potentially deteriorating political energy in the Middle East, right? That's logical, right? And people can make that if they want. But ultimately, if you're going to project the problems of the inferior technological system onto the superior technological system, and you have to understand that I'm not going to really even respect the question. And I'm not going to make fun of you for asking the question if you're genuinely asking that, right? Or if you're like this reporter and you're asking on behalf of other people, I'm not going to mock you individually. But I do think it's important to note the question is nonsensical. It does not make sense. No, Bitcoin did not die when the pandemic crash in 2020 of 60%. No, instead, 18 million people died, 6 million of which were from COVID. So that means that from 2020 to now in early 2024, 4 years, this last halving, which is the whole topic of this conversation here, 12 million people, at least 12 million people, needlessly died due to political instability and conflict. Okay, at least 12 million. Forget the war in Burma. Forget the war in Ethiopia and throughout the rest of Africa. Forget the cartels. Forget the 4 million people freezing to death every year because they're making energy more expensive. Forget the people that are dying from hunger just normally every single year. Okay, tens of millions of people died this last cycle because of political instability, and the political currencies funding the political instability are a major contributor to it. So don't criticize me for laughing at you when you're saying Bitcoin's dead. Bitcoin's not dead. Human beings are dying. It's the whole reason we're talking about Bitcoin in the first place. So anyway, let us continue.
It decouples the power to manipulate money from the state.
Right.
And it allows all of us to be in a fair competition so that real value can come to the surface.
All right, Natalie, I want you to hold right there.
Boom. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm just saying. It's not that I'm anti-America. It's not that I'm anti the government. It's simply that I'm against any human being in control of the dollar. Okay, I'm a Christian. I believe in total depravity. I believe that only Jesus is pure in heart. And actually, he said not even him, only the Father. But the point is, regardless of my personal beliefs, the point is there is no human intelligent enough, moral enough, virtuous enough, or insightful enough to have the right to control and manipulate the monetary supply of the human race. That simply just does not exist, right? Like, not even myself. When you realize not even I have the right to be the monetary god, to print currency out of thin air and distribute it onto the world's poorest, then you will understand Bitcoin. Until then, you'll continue to delude yourself and think that if I just time the market better, if I just manage my political currency better, then I'll be fine, right? That's the lie most people want to tell ourselves, right? And that's why people say Bitcoin's kind of a humbling experience for that reason, right? But Natalie hit the nail on the head. The solution with Bitcoin is not that it is a better monetary system because we're in charge and we control the halving. The reason it's better is because it was all predetermined. It was all preset. And now we don't know how to change it. And so if we don't know how to change it, nobody will change it. If nobody will change it, we have separated human depravity and corruption, moral corruption and lack of intelligence and over emotionality with the money supply itself, right? The red lines on a screen, emotion, lack of intelligence, and immorality. Bitcoin separates those human flaws from money itself. And that's why Bitcoin's so important. Not because its number go up, but because its freedom go up and life go up. So I think this is probably the moment where he's going to bring in Peter Schiff. We'll see.
Real value can come to the surface.
All right, Natalie, I want you to hold right there for a second because I'm going to get back to you in a second. But I also want to bring in a friend of ours. It seems these days everyone is gold member, right? Check this out. Goldman Sachs saying gold $2,700 an ounce this year. Now, we know, of course, emerging market central banks have been buying gold for a long time. Look at that. Go all the way back a decade or so, folks. These are central banks, not the ECB or the Fed. Let's bring in Euro Pacific Capital chief economist, also global strategist, Peter Schiff. All right, Peter, gold obviously rocking. Everyone's obviously jumping on the bandwagon. The question is, why now? Why at this particular time?
Well, gold's probably going to close at a new record high close today. It's only a few dollars off it now, above 23.70. Gold is rising because the dollar, the euro, the yen. Fiat currencies are losing value. Inflation is real. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere near the Fed's 2% target. We're headed in the wrong direction. We'll probably be in double digits by next year. And eventually, the first digit isn't going to be a 1. Central banks are out in front of this. They're the main buyers. You know, a lot of Americans have been foolishly selling their gold to buy these Bitcoin ETFs. You know, there's nothing else.
Okay, let's pause before Peter continues. Okay, again, emotion. Look, big green arrow, big green, 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 green. Everything on the screen is green. Look, gold is up 0.72%. Right? You know, these shows prey to our emotions. If Bitcoin is down 0.01%, big red screen. If gold is up 0.72%, big green screen. Right? Now, before Peter gets into the ETFs, okay, everything he just said, I agree with, right? You know, the factual things he said, I agree with. We're going the wrong direction. Gold probably is going to continue hitting new all-time highs. Like, yes, agree. And actually, I want to make clear, I respect Peter Schiff. You know, I know a couple of people that know him. Maybe he is ingenuine and is actively, you know, lying about his beliefs. But I happen to personally think that it's very likely he actually believes what he's saying. I do think he understands the problems of the fiat world very well. I do respect him for that. He has some amazing interviews, discussions, and lots of great podcast episodes about it. So I encourage people to hear him out. And if you're skeptical on Bitcoin, like also, he's a great voice for you to consider your skepticism on Bitcoin because he is one of the main advocates out there against Bitcoin. So if you're looking to hear all sides of the argument, Peter's a great place to start because, you know, I think the best debates or conversations are with people that agree on problems but disagree on solutions. And that's really what is the case with Peter here. He fundamentally agrees. Like I just said, I agree with everything he said about the problem. Fiat currency, political currency, that's the problem. But I think the one level more I disagree with him on is that it's not just an American issue, but it's a human issue, right? Kind of like I was saying before. You know, now he made a very important implication there. He implied we're going to see double-digit inflation next year, and the first digit is not going to be 1. Okay. Okay, Peter Schiff is implying we're going to have over 20% inflation next year. I don't have a strong opinion on that. I mean, it's definitely possible. I mean, again, that's very dramatic. You know, so maybe we do. Maybe we do have 20% or over 20% inflation next year in the United States. Maybe we do. I'll believe it when I see it. But on a long enough time horizon, Peter is absolutely right. We are definitely going to see 20% inflation at some point in the American political currency system. Maybe that's next year. Maybe that's 10 years from now. I don't like to say timelines. I think, frankly, that's one of Peter's weaknesses is that he makes predictions, assigns timelines to them. I think that's not intelligent because, you know, you can guess a price and you can guess a timeline, but never do the same thing at the same time, right? You know, I think gold is going to $5,000 an ounce, but I'm not going to guess a timeline, right? Because I got no idea. And Peter is reacting here to the question about a $2,700 gold ounce by the end of this year. You know, again, I think that's flawed. Is gold going to hit $2,700 an ounce? Absolutely. I believe inevitably. Am I intelligent enough to bet it's on this year? I don't think I'm nearly smart enough. And I don't even think it is an intelligence question. Unless you have some sort of extreme marketable edge, I don't think it's an intelligence question, right? I mean, there's so many factors in a complicated economy. You know, again, this gets back to the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem with humans controlling political currency is that we think we can outsmart the free market. We think we can outsmart billions of human beings making trillions of economic decisions a year with hundreds of thousands of different individual economic factors. Like, we think we can outsmart that and then get one specific exchange rate precisely right at the exact time. $2,700 gold ounce at the end of the year. I just don't think that's logical. I don't think it's logical for a central bank to do it. I don't think it's logical for a gold advocate to predict $2,700 by the end of this year. I don't even think it's logical or necessarily a good idea to predict 20% inflation next year. Even if he's right, I don't think it's the best course of action, right? And that's true with Bitcoiners too. I never say Bitcoin's going to $100,000 this year. I could guess, you know, I think maybe it will, but that doesn't mean that I have a firm conviction on it. That doesn't mean that I would go on TV and say, this is going to happen by this date. I think that kind of the extremism and over specificity is the precise reason why we need Bitcoin, because we just can't trust ourselves, right? So now I think we're going to get to the point where Peter starts away from where we agree, and probably Natalie Brunell, I'm assuming, agrees with everything he said. I think we're going to start shifting more towards where we disagree regarding Bitcoin. Sorry, Peter, that's not a very flattering still image of you, but let's keep it going.
Selling their gold to buy these Bitcoin ETFs. You know, there's nothing elegant about losing your money in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not going up. In fact, Bitcoin peaked 2.5 years ago at about 37 ounces of gold. As we speak now, it's worth less than 27 ounces. That's a 27% decline in 2.5 years. This is a bear market. Right. Bitcoin is going much lower than this. If Natalie were smart, as soon as this segment is over, she would sell all of her Bitcoin. Because if she doesn't sell it now, she's going to sell it later at a much lower price. All right.
Well, them's
okay. Harsh words. Wow. Okay. Yeah. If Natalie were smart, she'd sell it. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's a bit direct. I suppose I could be a bit direct at times too. I guess I'm a hypocrite. Yeah, actually, Peter made a really, really good point. I agree with. He views it as a negative. I view it as a positive. The point Peter made, unfortunately, Fox Business didn't throw up a chart in time. But what Peter threw up there is the here. Actually, let me look up a chart real quick so I can actually show it. Well, actually, I'll add it in the slide later. I'll put it somewhere on the screen here. In post, but what Peter's referring to is the price of Bitcoin in terms of gold. Yes, that's the way to do it. Don't price Bitcoin in terms of nonsensical political currency units that the United States government can make out of a whim. Okay, the United States debt was $40 million at one point. Then it went up 1,000x to 40 billion. Then it went up again 1,000x to now we're closing in on 40 trillion. Like, it is nonsensical. The Louisiana Purchase was what, $18 million? Okay, is the middle third of the United States worth $18 million? No, there are hundreds of people within that third that have houses worth $18 million, right? Do not price things in terms of dollars. It's nonsensical. And so, Peter, I applaud you for pricing Bitcoin in terms of gold. That is the way to do it. You know, if you are a gold advocate, you should be pricing the world in terms of gold. If you're an advocate for stocks, you should be pricing the world in terms of stocks. If you're a Bitcoin bro or Bitcoin nerd like me, wearing a bow tie because you're way out there on the craziness curve, you should be pricing the world in Bitcoin. And that's the only way to know if things are going well or not, right? So my point is, I'm glad Peter, and again, I think Peter is being intellectually honest with his worldview here. His worldview is that gold is the money and that I should price the world in gold, right? No, I think that is the accurate way to do it. If Peter were here saying that, gold is better because it's up in fiat dollars and Bitcoin's down in the last week, I think that is intellectually inconsistent and stupid. But at least Peter's being honest here. However, he's saying that's a bad thing. The Bitcoin is still on a downward trend. I would disagree. Bitcoin is up 4x in the last year against political currency units. It's up about 3x or 3.5x, I believe, against gold. Like, I mean, yeah, you could say that's a bear market, but I think it's pretty clear it's a bull market. And also, if we're going to artificially assume that the middle or latter half of 2021 was the peak for Bitcoin in terms of gold, what about the decade before it? Bitcoin has dramatically outperformed gold in the decade before 2021. If you want to really compare Bitcoin in terms of gold, look at 2011 to 2021. I mean, why would you say in that scenario that it's arbitrarily, gold is in the bull market, Bitcoin's in the bear market? To me, if you look from 2011 to 2021, it looks like gold is in the bear market and Bitcoin's in a raging bull market. And if that's true, that for the 10-year period between 2011 and 2021, gold did basically nothing besides go down against Bitcoin, over down 99.5%. Well, then why would you say that this is now the beginnings of a bear market? Isn't it too early to say that? I think the much more reasonable case, Peter, is that the dollar was artificially constrained and supply reserve jacked up interest rates, as he accurately describes on his show, right? It increased the demand for dollars in 2021 and 2022 because inflation was getting out of control, and that increased the demand for dollars. And that means that people were, selling off their gold. They were selling off the Bitcoin, right? I don't think we can make a long-term projection of assuming that, Bitcoin's going up forever against Bitcoin just because it's gone up a little bit in, as one period of time, not even the most recent period of time in the last year, and not even the longest period of time, the decade before it, but basically Peter is cherry picking the late 2021 to late 2022 period and saying, this is the beginning of a bear market for Bitcoin in terms of gold forever, right? When in reality, the period after that and the extended period before it are proving the precise opposite. So, Peter, I respect you for being intellectually consistent here, but I do think still you are cherry picking the data artificially. I think that's a big problem.
what we call fighting words. And I think there's similar drivers for both, but let me introduce the two. Natalie, meet Peter. Peter, meet Natalie. All right, Natalie, some choice words for you. What would you tell Peter?
Oh, I know, Peter. And you know what? Bitcoiners don't feel the need to constantly attack gold because we're not threatened by gold. And the reason that we have this failed fiat experiment that has impoverished our nation is because of the defects of gold. The fact that it's not easily portable, it's not easily verifiable, it doesn't offer instant final global settlement. And so you know what? Centralized authorities hijacked it, they papered over it, and we have a system of leverage and rehypothecation that hurts the working class. Bitcoin is immune to all of that. It is the savings account for billions of people that we really need and can most rely on. And it offers that final global settlement that we need. And so gold is the analog version of sound money, but Bitcoin is the digital version. And that's why it's going to be the faster horse in this race.
Yeah, great response, Natalie. There's so much there. Yeah, the painful part, as much as I respect Peter, the painful part is that, as Natalie's talking about billions of people onboarding to Bitcoin and using Bitcoin as their medium of savings, unfortunately, you can hear Peter laughing in the background. And this is where, again, like Natalie said, well put, is you don't want to attack the gold bugs, but you do have to admit the gold bugs actively are betting against a technological system that's going to benefit billions of people. You are not on the winning side of technological system to help millions of people not die to political games. Your heart is in the right place. If you're into gold and silver, your heart's in the right place. You understand the problem, but in action and practicality, you're not on the Bitcoin side. You're not advocating for it, right? How do the bottom? Okay, here's a question for Peter, right? How do the bottom 3 billion human beings on the planet on the economic ladder? How do they save in gold? What do they get? A little sliver of it? Do they get it in a little grit? Like what? Do they buy 1/1000th of an ounce? I mean, like Peter, like this is a legitimate question, right? Gold is not infinitely divisible in the same way Bitcoin is. Gold does not have an absolutely finite hard cap. Gold does not have an absolutely finite hard cap like Bitcoin does, right? These are real problems. These are shortcomings. It's not something to laugh at, Peter. It's something to take seriously. If over the last 4,000 years, only 30% of the adults on the planet have property rights, okay, why would we think anything's going to change in the next 4,000 years, right? The only way for it to change is a new technological paradigm, is a new technological system. I believe that is Bitcoin. You can have your disagreements with that, but that is a fact that if gold has not done it yet over thousands of years in increasing prosperity, many orders of magnitude, it's not going to do it in the future. We need a new kind of technological system. A very, very small number of people in the world are financially sound with gold. Not even those 30% of people that do have property rights, but a significantly smaller number, orders of magnitude smaller. I would argue not even 2% of the world probably owns Bitcoin, owns gold in their own self-custody safe, right? I mean, it's probably not even small. So the question is, if not even 2% of the world has adopted gold as their form of preserving purchasing power in the last 4,000 years, how compelling is it that Bitcoin gotten up to, let's say, 0.2% adoption in less than 15 years? Like, if you're a gold bug, that should be really intriguing. How is it that Bitcoin, in terms of number of users, could onboard a significant percentage of the total number of gold users? Maybe it's just 1%, but that's still significant because we're talking 1% of users within way less than 1% at the time. We also have to keep in mind, too, additionally, not only that, but the 7 of the 10 fastest adopting nations in the world for Bitcoin are places on the planet that are considered developing nations. Places like Thailand, like Costa Rica, like South Africa, El Salvador, obviously. Okay, places like these are the places. Nigeria, these are the places that are adopting Bitcoin the fastest per capita, despite their incomes being significantly less than us rich Westerners in America, like you, Peter Schiff, and your tie on Fox News, or like Natalie in her nice dress, or like the host and his fancy, probably luxury sneakers, or like me with my little, pretentious bow tie, right? It's like us four, we have the privilege to debate this. What about this privilege? What about the people out there in Thailand making a few $1,000s a year? The people in El Salvador? I've been to El Salvador, Peter. I've been to Costa Rica. I've been to South Africa. I've been to Portugal. I've been across the world, literally across the seas, and also Australia and Europe too, but those aren't developing nations. I've been to developing nations and seen locals use Bitcoin. You may not like Bitcoin. You may not understand Bitcoin, But respectfully, I don't think it's appropriate to laugh at Natalie Brunell when she's advocating for the financial independence and the financial sovereignty of the bottom 70% of the world's adults. Bitcoin is that technology. And here's an important distinction. Why has it not happened yet? Gold's been around thousands of years. Why would it go away? Why would Bitcoin arise now? It's because we now finally have the energy to unlock Bitcoin. Let's take the length of measurement, for example. We're debating the measurement of value here. Is gold or Bitcoin better? Let's take a step back and debate the measurement of length, right? For thousands of years, people used various farming metrics for determining length, right? You use the stride of a cow, you use the length of the king's forearm, you call that a cubit. You use the average length of a man's foot, you do that. You have 3 grains of barley lined up, that's an inch. The imperial system, all forms of measurement in human history, the French were basically based on agriculture or livestock or human anatomy. These were barter systems of measurement. You have one barter system controlled and manipulated by humans and another one. This is the fundamental problem and why these systems of measurement are inferior. If I'm a king and I have a length of measurement, a cubit, the length of my arm, and I'm going to call out and demand for ships to be built, well then, if I just hire workers with shorter arms, now all of a sudden, a 50 cubit long ship is less material. I can artificially manipulate the length of measure by hiring people with different length arms, and I can artificially manipulate the amount of energy I'm actually going to expend, right? This is the problem with political currency. In the same way you can manipulate the length of a cubit, you can manipulate the length, quote unquote, the length of a dollar, right? You can manipulate the extent of the purchasing power of a dollar. This is the fundamental problem. And so no matter if you're using the length of an arm or using an oxen or using, something else in the abstract world, and this is the same thing with time, right? You can measure on the stars and the moon and the sun or whatever, but ultimately, if you don't have a consistent way to mark time after second after second, if you don't have a way to measure meter after meter after meter, you're going to be able to have this ability to manipulate things to your own ability, right? Now, the French came along. What did the French do that was amazing? What the French did is they went out and they had a couple, I think it was 2 or 3 scientists. This is, 400 or 500 years ago or so. And they measured across Europe using trigonometry and calculus and stuff that I surely can't do. They went out and they measured what would 1/10 millionth of the latitude of Earth be. And they decided, they concluded, they found that it's exactly 1 meter, right? They invented the meter. Yes, they invented a number, and so basically Peter Schiff, in this concept, actually, I'll get to him more in a moment, that I would argue is gold. Okay, the circumference of Earth is very, very fixed. It's very close to being finitely fixed, right? The most dependable thing on the planet Earth is the circumference of the planet Earth itself. So that I think that is the good analogy for gold. For thousands of years, people were using all sorts of farming alchemy to determine the length or the different measurements for length. And then these French scientists come along and they create the meter stick that is as precise as we possibly can be with the technology we had at the time. Okay, the person from the ancient Babylon or Persia, they do not have the resources, the material, the funding, or the mathematical knowledge to calculate what these French scientists did and create the meter, right? They just don't have that. And also, they didn't need it yet. When you're building houses out of stone, you don't need the ability to have the precise amount of measurement that the French did when they're building, the Palace of Versailles and the Renaissance's, buildings, right? As society upgraded and humans upgraded, we had a greater need for more precise units of measurement, and we had a greater ability to create more precise units of measurement. Now enter light, the speed of light, right? There's lots of light on my face right now, right? What is even better than dividing the circumference or the latitude of Earth by a factor of 10 million? Even better is taking the speed of light in a vacuum and picking a specific fraction of that. And so we have since upgraded, since those French guys that created the meter stick based on the latitude of Earth, we have since upgraded to calculating the exact precise speed of light in a vacuum, dividing it by a very specific fraction, 299,000 and something, and that is our new meter stick. So it's basically the same on human scale. It feels the same. The old meter stick and the new meter stick, they basically feel the same. But the new one is even more precise, okay? And in the same way that the Romans and the ancient Babylons did not have the technological ability nor the desire to measure the circumference of the world to get their version of a meter stick, likewise today, those French scientists didn't have the need to measure down things onto the subatomic level, right? Like with the speed of light, right? And so what's my point in saying all this? Gold is the French's meter stick based on the circumference of the Earth. Bitcoin is the one based on the speed of light in a vacuum with a specific fraction, right? And so Peter, getting back to Peter here, Peter's problem, I believe, is that he is this ancient Roman, or he is the French scientist, let's say, and he is out there pounding the table saying, measuring the circumference of the Earth is great. Yes, gold is not absolutely finite. Yes, the circumference of the Earth is changing very slowly with tectonic plate shifts and volcanoes. Yes, but this is the best we have. You're out there measuring things in barley and the king's arm and the king's forearm and people's feet. You're out there using all these, use the meter stick. This is best. This is best. And he's saying, because it's based on something real, something tangible, like the Earth. The Earth has mass, and we're measuring a certain part. This is real. This is way more real than that, right? And that's why gold has monetary premium. That's why this meter stick has value. And the Bitcoiners are coming here saying, from a first principles perspective, yes, light does not exist in the same way that Earth exists. Earth has mass. Light is photons, right? It does not have mass, right? And it can travel, at the speed of light, right? Essentially instantly on human scale, right? Like, yes, we know it's not practical. We know not every human being measures things at the speed of light, but using a number and a specific fraction, you can't destroy a fraction. Yes, it is extremely difficult to change the circumference of Earth by having volcanoes erupt or by having, it's extremely difficult to do that, but you still can do it. None of us can stop the speed of light. And Peter Schiff will be out here saying, oh, well, yeah, but nobody ever would change the circumference of Earth, but it can be done. And that's precisely why it will be done, right? And so this is the fundamental problem and the fundamental disagreement here of what I don't think Peter understands about Natalie's perspective here, is that the whole reason we need Bitcoin, the whole reason we need it, is because we are graduating from the analog world to the digital world. This is precisely what Nikola Tesla and Henry Ford and many others predicted in the early 20th century, is that we are beginning the information age. They predicted first, we're going to convert all natural energy into electricity. We're going to convert all that electricity into information, like these computers. We're going to convey all that information, and we're going to spread it across the world without wires. It's going to teleport through the air. People are going to watch videos of Luke Broyles in an orange bow tie talking about these things in the future, right? And we're also going to invent some sort of algorithm that preserves purchasing power, that all the electricity, computing power, and information from the internet gets funneled into, right? That's what we're predicting. Peter is having trouble understanding why we would need to measure the speed of light to get meter stick, when in his mind, he has a perfectly usable meter stick right now. The speed of light meter stick, it's based on nothing. So a photon doesn't have mass. The Earth has mass. I don't understand why we need that. And Peter, the reason we need it is because we can't go on this way. Gold has not worked for the modern era. It's the whole reason why we have fiat currencies. And looking into the future only gets more bleak. What do you do with your gold? When we transition from dollars to CBDCs, what do you do? The farther out in the future you go, the less and less useful analog gold becomes. As we transition to the digital world, the need for an analog meter stick becomes less valuable. And this is what I don't think Peter understands. And perhaps that's his age. Perhaps that's just he has his bias. Perhaps that's his financial incentive. I don't know why that would be, but I think this is the fundamental problem the gold fans and supporters do not understand, is that gold was great. Gold was a wonderful technological solution. Gold helped us upgrade to a wonderful meter stick, the very first form of pricing the world in, right? Like Peter was before. He's pricing the world in terms of gold. He was measuring the world in terms of the meter stick based on the Earth's circumference, right? Like, that's wonderful. That's great. Gold is great. But unfortunately, you're missing the first principles aspect, that the unit of measure that is the most difficult to change is the one that's going to win. And as much as we all understand that the circumference of Earth is not changing anytime soon, and likewise the supply of gold is not changing anytime soon, it is not perfectly finite. And Bitcoin is, and because of that, and because it's infinitely divisible, because you can infinitely divide the photons down and down and down, you can't divide the Earth's mass down and down. That means that billions of people are going to be able to use Bitcoin that cannot use gold. And so I do not think it is appropriate, Peter, to be laughing in the face of Natalie as she's explaining this to you, that it's not about number go up, it's about helping billions of people do what gold could have never done for them.
There's nothing sound about Bitcoin. It's losing the race right now. Take a look at your screen. Gold is up $25, $26, and Bitcoin is getting clobbered. There is no flaw in gold. Gold worked great for 5,000 years. The problem is the flaw is with governments. The flaw is with human beings, not with gold. But Bitcoin is really flawed because it doesn't have any actual value. Gold is the most useful metal on the periodic table. That's why it's money. Now, it has great characteristics that make it better money than other commodities, but absent its intrinsic value, it couldn't be money. And Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. It's just a digital
let me jump
string
in 1 second
of
because
numbers.
Okay. It's so predictable. Yeah. Oh, it's so hard because, like, he's right. The problem is human beings. But Peter, human beings can control and manipulate gold. Gold is analog. You can have human beings store gold in a safe and then give out paper units artificially compared to the gold. Like, I don't. Oh, you're so close, man. But yeah, the problem is human beings. But that's the precise point. Maybe Peter doesn't understand that Bitcoin cannot be stopped by human beings, right? I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's part of it. But I guess a little more cool-headed of a response here. I think Peter's got a very good point. However, he brings up a little word that makes me itch: intrinsic value. What is intrinsic value? What is it? I mean, what has intrinsic value? I mean, like, really, the idea of intrinsic value, I think, is nonsensical. The idea of intrinsic value is that something is intrinsically valuable because just it is. But respectfully, value, in particular economic value on something, is in the eyes of the beholder, right? Like, right now, I am breathing oxygen. I breathe a lot of oxygen. Peter, you're breathing oxygen, and you all watching this reaction video right now, you're breathing oxygen. Does oxygen have intrinsic value? I mean, right now, I don't think it does. You can't monetize oxygen. But if all of a sudden the doors to your room were being sealed shut and all the oxygen in the room was all the oxygen you're ever going to get, I mean, all of a sudden oxygen would be very valuable to you, right? I mean, this is the infamous, water on an island scenario, right? This water is cheap. We give it out for free, right? But if you're on an island or in the middle of the Sahara Desert, all of a sudden that water is very valuable. Is it that water suddenly has intrinsic value? Like, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Like, no, it's not that complicated. It's just as simple as it is. The thing that humans value is what's going to have value, right? I mean, again, this gets back to the whole meter stick idea. What value does a meter stick based on the circumference of the earth have to someone that can't measure or verify that, right? This is the problem. If you send future technology back in time, it has no use. If I'm the French scientist, I make the meter stick that works. I send it back to ancient Babylon or Alexander the Great. It has no value, okay? Even if the meter stick is correct, and it's exactly 1/10 millionth of the world's latitude, the world's circumference, right? Even if it is correct, how on earth can they verify that's the correct one? How can they do that? They don't have the technology to do it, right? And the same thing with Bitcoin. If you send Bitcoin back in time 1,000 years, it has no value to people of the past because they don't have computers. They don't have electricity. They can't run a node. They can't verify Bitcoin supply. Okay, sending future technology back has no value. If you send a car back to the ancient Greeks, it has no value. They'll tear it apart and they'll use it for other things that they need, right? My dad's a pastor. I've seen a lot of mission organizations in the Christian and secular world, and my relatively short lifespan. And this is the fundamental problem of religious and secular organizations when they're sending aid to foreign countries. They're sending energy sources. They're not sending it back in time, but at least technologically speaking, they're sending it back in time, right? The infamous example is you send back fish nets to people in sub-Saharan Africa so they can fish better, right? Well, no, they use it for mosquito nets, right? Or it's the inverse, I think, actually. They send mosquito nets because, malaria is a problem, but their larger problem is food. Who's going to worry about malaria next month or next year when you got to eat this week? If you're sending future tech back, if you're sending mosquito nets back, they will simply disassemble it and use it for their immediate needs, right? And unfortunately, this is what Peter doesn't understand about looking at the future to the past or looking at the past to the future, right? Is that you can say gold has been the best for 5,000 years or whatever, and maybe that's true. But what about the thousands of years before it? Why is someone in a hunter-gatherer culture in the ancient days of early human civilization, why would they have any value for gold? They don't. So why is it that gold is intrinsic value? Gold has zero intrinsic value to people before the era of gold. If you're a hunter-gatherer with a mammoth and a saber-toothed tiger and your little tribe, what intrinsic value does gold have? Okay, and looking into the future, okay, a colony in Mars, okay, what intrinsic value to them is it going to be to have gold? You're going to have to load it in a rocket, shoot it out to space out of Earth's gravity well, have it go a few tens of millions of miles over to Mars, 150 million miles, I think, have it land, and then do it. So what? It can sit on the Martian dust and collect dust in the sandstorms and eventually get lost. Is that intrinsic value? The problem with intrinsic value and this intellectual cop-out that Peter has here is he is assuming that gold has objective value to everyone of all time, and he uses the fancy word of intrinsic value. But the problem, Peter, is that he's criticizing the very people, the very politicians and people saying that gold is worthless and that fiat value, the whole problem with political currency is unit buys. The whole problem with political currency is that these Keynesian economists have these views of intrinsic value and what's intrinsically valuable. But unfortunately, Peter doesn't understand. He is falling prey to two of the most pervasive and the most consistent intellectual fallacies of the very people he is claiming he disagrees with, right? Unit bias. He mentioned in the interview clip we just watched, gold's up $26 and Bitcoin's down. Okay, it doesn't matter. That's unit bias, Peter. That's objective unit bias. Okay, gold is $2,000 an ounce. Bitcoin is over $65,000 a coin. A $26 move in gold is not the same as a $26 move in Bitcoin. Peter himself is referring to unit bias in the price of gold, and also he has unit bias in terms of time, not just in price, but in time. His unit bias is the last 5,000 years. But Peter, your timeline is not long enough in either direction. You got to extend out beyond 5,000 years into the past, and you have to extend out beyond 5 minutes into the future, right? This is the fundamental problem. You're looking at 5,000 years and assuming that is objective, and now that means gold has intrinsic value, and also I'm subjecting myself to unit bias and price because of that. And also, so you're falling prey to intrinsic value, you're falling prey to unit bias, and that unfortunately has you arriving at the long conclusion that somehow gold has intrinsic value that is just going to be magically here forever, and that we're never going to technologically upgrade for that. Gold was a technological upgrade away from mammoth hides, right? And the hunter-gatherer culture of that technological era of the Stone Age, that was the money. Mammoth hides were the honey. You didn't need gold yet. You didn't need to save money out 50 years. You may not live 50 years. You need to save money for the next 5 months to get through the winter, and gold's not going to do that for you. Peter, if you were to time travel back in time 5,000 years, and you're going to try to explain to the locals gold and why gold's important, why gold is the next step upwards, the locals there would go on their version of a Fox television news show with you and complain that, oh, gold doesn't have intrinsic value. It's just a rock. Even if it's the best rock, mammoth hides are the things that have intrinsic value. We've always eaten mammoth hides. We always will eat mammoth hides. The mammoth will never go extinct. We always will use mammoth hides as our form of currency. It's nonsensical, Peter. You're falling prey to intrinsic value, which is a fallacy. You're also falling prey to unit bias. Neither of these things are true. And unfortunately, I think it's blinding you to understanding what Bitcoin really is.
Because
all of this is just a bunch of hype.
Anything could be money, right? On the island of Yap, they used to have big stone money. Anything could be money if people use it as an exchange. And this is the thing.
But that's because they.
But here's the thing, though. You have to admit, Bitcoin is on the rise. Wall Street has embraced it. And this is just a tiny speck. I mean, could you imagine, Peter, at the rate of recognition, if Bitcoin keeps going at this rate, it's hard to deny it could go substantially higher.
Now, I just told you it's been dropping for 2.5 years. That's when it
just hit an all-time high recently.
And I think that decline is going to accelerate. It does not keep going up. They suck.
Or clarify terms, like there is a clear misunderstanding. See, the host is saying Bitcoin's at all-time highs because he's pricing in dollars. He doesn't understand what Peter is saying. Peter is saying, no, Bitcoin is down in terms of gold in the last 2.5 years, which actually I think is true. I mean, the last 18 months, it's been skyrocketing against gold. But, see, this is the problem. The host is coming from the fiat mindset of, wait, Peter, I don't understand. Anything can be money, and Bitcoin's skyrocketing in fiat value. It could just keep going up in fiat value at this rate, right? Like, I think the host is asking a genuine question here, but somehow he missed what Peter was saying. And a lot of this is credit that they're doing this live, right? I mean, so that's a huge part of it too. In a news segment, you can only have so much of a conversation. But see, this is the problem. When people, throw around these terms, they don't clarify, they don't really think from a first principles perspective. You got the host talking in terms of fiat. You got Peter talking in terms of pricing the world in gold. You got Natalie Brunell over there pricing the world in Bitcoin. And there's just a lot of misunderstanding there, and Peter's kind of speechless here. And I'm not making fun of him. He's kind of speechless and stuttering here, not because he's unintelligent, but because there's a clear misunderstanding of what everything's being priced in, right? This is why we need Bitcoin. We got to graduate from the barter system of pricing things in forms of other various things, of which all these things humans can control. We got to graduate to Bitcoin, and we won't have these moments of confusion. So let's rewatch that clip, and you can see hopefully a little bit more what I'm talking about.
It could go substantially higher.
Now, I just told you it's been dropping for 2.5 years. That's when it
just
made
hit an
its
all-time
peak.
high recently.
And I think that decline is going to accelerate. It does not keep going up. They suckered in a bunch of people. Wall Street didn't embrace it. They're just trying to make a buck off it. I mean, these big Wall Street firms aren't buying any Bitcoin with their own money. This is their customers' money that are dumb enough to buy it. They're just booking the bets. They're operating the casino. They're not at the blackjack tables or the roulette wheels. That's their customers that are doing that.
Natalie wants to jump back in.
If you look at the short term, Bitcoin is going to be volatile. But if we zoom out, Bitcoin has outperformed gold. In fact, when Hamas attacked Israel, since then, Bitcoin is up 125% and gold is up only 27%. So let's really look at the numbers that we're seeing. And the best thing about Bitcoin is, again, no one controls the ledger, whereas gold is really vulnerable to centralization and top down control, which is why we need a system that is a neutral place to store your wealth. We need a neutral system,
Natalie,
and protocol.
even
and that is
compare.
Bitcoin
Peter,
for the
why
digital
can't someone
world.
own both? Why can't someone have exposure to both?
Yeah, well, first of all, Bitcoin has outperformed everything. So don't compare it to gold. It's outperformed stocks, real estate, bonds, collectibles. That's because it's a gigantic bubble. No, if you want to own Bitcoin, I don't care. If you want to lose money in Bitcoin, go right ahead. Doesn't bother me. But I'm trying to help give people advice as to what to do with their money. And if they want to have an investment portfolio, Bitcoin has no part in it. But, if you like gambling, if you want to take some of the money that we're going to take to the racetracks or buy lottery tickets with or go to Vegas, if you want to take some of that money and gamble on Bitcoin or any of the other 20,000 cryptocurrencies that are out there, go right ahead. I mean, it doesn't bother me, but I don't want to buy any Bitcoin. I mean, sure, had I bought Bitcoin years and years ago when I first learned about it, yeah, I could have made a lot of money selling it now to the greater fools, but I didn't do that.
That's something
but
he said on my show. He wishes he bought Bitcoin.
Yeah, so now.
Okay, there's like too much going on there. There was like too quick. I think I was a little too much for him. I think the host should have let Natalie finish her question because Natalie's making a very good point. Peter, your thesis, the gold bug thesis is that gold is a better store of purchasing power in terms of political instability. Well, to Natalie's point, Bitcoin has outperformed gold since Hamas invaded Israel back in October of 2023. Peter, you can't cop out of that answer. You can't say, oh, well, you can't compare gold and Bitcoin. You just did. You compared gold to Bitcoin. You said that, oh, Bitcoin's in a bear market priced in gold. I don't think the host is still caught onto that yet. Peter compared Bitcoin in terms of gold. Natalie then did the opposite and compared gold in terms of Bitcoin since the very precise massive evil terrorist attack against Israel in October of last year. Massive amount of political instability since then, obviously, where Bitcoin's outperformed. Gold's falling down in terms of Bitcoin, right? Like, Peter, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say it's unfair on a relatively short time rise into the last 2 years to say that Bitcoin's in a bear market priced in gold. And then Natalie comes out and says, well, in the last 6 months with the political instability, which is the very thesis for intrinsic value of gold over Bitcoin. You can't say that. It's just not logical. Peter, you're being a hypocrite here. I'm not saying that to hate on you. I'm just saying it because we all need to be called out. I'm a hypocrite at times. I can't be a hypocrite. Natalie is, the host is. We all are. We all over flaws. But Peter, you can't say don't compare gold and Bitcoin and then price it in gold and Bitcoin, right? Like, your whole point is don't compare Bitcoin to gold because Bitcoin is an illogical bubble, in your argument, being controlled by human beings. And I know you think that because you compare it to the other 20,000 digital tokens out there, right? And unfortunately, the host is also falling prey to this misunderstanding because he's pricing Bitcoin in terms of the US dollars. But Bitcoin's not at an all-time high in gold. And so that's what he was misunderstanding. So Peter is making the mistake of ascribing the error of which the host is making. The host is making the error of pricing gold and Bitcoin in terms of American political currency units and think that's the way in which we measure it. And Peter is saying, well, I think Bitcoin also can be manipulated like the political currency of the United States. And so therefore, you don't have the right to compare the gold in terms of dollars. Gold is priceless in terms of dollars. And likewise, you don't have the right to compare Bitcoin to gold because Bitcoin can be just as manipulated, right? That's I'm trying to articulate what I genuinely believe Peter's thinking in his mind here. So unfortunately, the host has this fake abstraction of value in the American dollar unit of account. Peter is artificially conflating Natalie's perspective, pricing things in Bitcoin, with the host perspectives of pricing things in dollars, and it's just all mixed up, right? And this is the hard part with communicating with someone like Peter, is that he's very intelligent. He's been ahead of the curve. He accurately predicted the great financial crisis 2008. He's got so much right, but unfortunately, he's ascribing the falsehoods of fiat currency also to Bitcoin. The only question that matters, and this is an important point for anyone watching that's somewhere in the middle of this debate, the only point that matters, the only question that matters is, can Bitcoin be manipulated, distorted, debased, or controlled by human beings? If it can, Peter Schiff is right. He is right if Bitcoin does not remain decentralized and secure. If it can, and if it does, Natalie's correct. That's the only thing that matters. As soon as I see any indicator that Bitcoin has been hijacked, compromised, or taken over by any human being, including myself, I will sell it all. I will sell all the Bitcoin. I will convert to Peter's worldview, because Peter is right with the assumption that Bitcoin can be manipulated and controlled by human beings, as he said, like the other 20,000 digital tokens, or as is implied, the American political currency unit. Then Peter is correct that gold is going to outperform Bitcoin. But again, the problem is that Peter is being a hypocrite to himself. He said it's not fair to compare gold and Bitcoin. Yeah, that's the precise measure at which he is declaring victory in, by looking at Bitcoin priced in gold for the last 18 months. So let's finish this interview out and see where they have their final point.
Natalie, bottom line, though,
but
is
I'm not going to buy it now. And Natalie, you're going to wish you sold Bitcoin. Mark my words.
All right.
You're going to be ruining the day.
We
I
take all of this stuff,
If
Peter.
I'd only sold my Bitcoin, I'd have had a lot of money.
We got 30 seconds left. I got to give Natalie the last word.
I think the American dream has really been hijacked. We tried gold. It didn't work. It was papered over. That system has failed the American people. And Bitcoin does provide hope for us, the working class. We want to be able to work for something that has to be measured by a free market so that we can see real value emerge, as opposed to being captured by politics and bureaucracy, which ultimately is a system that benefits the few at the expense of everyone else. And it's a system in which the politically connected and the special interest groups really are at the top. And so we need a system that is for the people. Bitcoin is for the people.
Natalie, thank you very much. Peter, thank you very much.
Wow. Okay. Well, there we go. Yeah, just like that. Yeah. Shoot. Unfortunately, with these mainstream media outlets, you can't have extended debate. Like I really would like an extended debate here, but unfortunately, when you got all those ads and colors on the screen, the big titles, fear mongering or greed, right? You can't really have an extended debate. I mean, that whole 9-minute clip, I mean, basically Peter made 2 points, Natalie made 1.5 points, the host made like a point, and there was a lot of talking to each other. So unfortunately, it's just kind of how, the medium is the message, right? Unfortunately, that's kind of how it is. And I really wish there was an extended platform for people to be able to do that, right? So anyway, my closing thoughts on that, it's humorous to me to hear Peter's, here's little mannerisms and laughs as Natalie's talking. But of course, Natalie's right that gold has failed. In fact, I don't even like saying that, because gold didn't fail. Gold has failed at transitioning to the digital era. Gold did not fail for the 5,000 years, like Peter's saying. Obviously, thousands of years ago, gold was the best thing they had. Gold was the technological solution that worked. And yes, gold was better than Bitcoin 1,000 years ago, because you use Bitcoin. Bitcoin's worthless. You don't have radio waves. You don't have the internet. You don't have electricity and computers, right? So yeah, Peter's right. Gold is better than Bitcoin for 1,000 years ago. But unfortunately for him, we're transitioning into a digital era. And so, I think the gold advocates like Peter tend to have those kind of mannerisms and reactions and chuckle in the background as Natalie's talking, as we just saw, because they hear what Natalie's saying, that gold has failed, we need money for the people, blah, blah, blah. But to him, in his perspective, he views gold as being the money for the people, as gold being outside of the system of political currency. That's what he views as a solution. So he hears Natalie bashing gold, saying it fails, and then says the precise exact things that he thinks is true about gold. But the problem is, I think the fundamental problem with Peter is he's not viewing money as technological innovations. He's viewing money as having intrinsic value. And he has decided in his own mind to ascribe that intrinsic value to gold. And I think that is why he's being completely blind to the single most important innovation of the 21st century, which is Bitcoin. Natalie, Peter, and the host, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, all of you, wonderful work on it. I think all three of these people are very well-intentioned people. Obviously, the only one I've ever met in person is Natalie Brunell. I've done a podcast with her and hung out with her a little bit. I've never met Peter or the other one, but I respect the work all of them are doing, even if I have my disagreements with probably all three of them. But what is the takeaway for you? My encouragement for you all watching this is to not make fun of the gold supporters too much. They've been right for the last 4,985 years. They've been correct. The last 15, they've been wrong about Bitcoin. Like, I know they're wrong. I know they've lost 99.9% of their purchasing power in terms of Bitcoin. Like, and I know it's a little laughable when they ascribe themselves to the very logical fallacies of the Keynesians, with which they're trying to disagree with. Like, I get it. It is funny. Peter's comments on Twitter are definitely very hilarious. They are laughable, and they will age poorly. But we have to give credit where credit is due. The gold bugs have had the meter stick for the last 4,985 years, or last 5,000 years. They have had the superior way of measuring economic purchasing power on the planet. And what all the Bitcoiners are doing is saying, we have an upgrade from the Earth to photons, from 1/10 millionth of latitude to a specific fraction of the speed of light. We have a better upgrade. Bitcoin is the better upgrade. And because it's a better upgrade with a more finite cap than gold, with more infinite divisibility than gold, because it's digital, not analog, and because it has a perpetually possible higher amount of energy expenditure to create new issued Bitcoins, Bitcoin is the superior meter stick to gold. Bitcoin is the superior store of value. And you cannot cop out and say it is fair to price Bitcoin in terms of gold, and it's not fair to price gold in terms of Bitcoin. You can't cop out with that. You can't cop out with intrinsic value, and you can't be biased to the mere last 5,000 years and say that, Bitcoin's worthless because the last 5,000 years bubbles came and went, and the last 15 years the new Bitcoin bubble has come. This time's not different. Blah blah blah. That's true, Peter, until the gold comes to the mammoth hides and Bitcoin comes to the gold bugs. Right? The last 15 years. Bitcoin is a bubble, unless what I said before is true. No matter where you fall in this debate, whether you're all in Bitcoin, all in gold, or somewhere in the middle trying to own both, ask yourself the question, is Bitcoin going to remain decentralized and secure? That is the only question that matters. If it is going to remain decentralized and secure outside of the control of any human entity, then gold is trending to zero forever in terms of Bitcoin. If Bitcoin has the possibility of debased, corrupted, centralized, or losing its security, then it is not logical to own a significant amount of Bitcoin. It's only logical to own a significant amount of gold. That's the only question that matters. And unfortunately, I do not think Peter is seriously asking himself that question, because he is blinded by the intrinsic value argument, and he is blinded by his unit bias of a specific portion of the timeline of the human race. And just because it's a few thousand years, and just because the Bitcoin is barely a decade and a half, it does not mean that you're inherently right. It means that you're subscribing to the unit bias, not going on first principles. So what are the actionable steps you can take if you want to buy Bitcoin, if you want to get exposure to Bitcoin? Links in the description below this video. I have a 5-step Bitcoin education accelerator. No matter where you are in your Bitcoin journey, if you have not yet bought any Bitcoin, if you're a gold bug or you have never owned either, and you want to buy some Bitcoin, link in the description has very simple where to buy Bitcoin and how to do it safely, where you don't get scammed or pay outrageous fees. Or even if you have $1 million of Bitcoin in self-custody, or $1 million of Bitcoin ETF, okay? There are educational resources in the links below this video in the description, a 38-page checklist for your self-custody Bitcoin setup, a 5-step simple, beginner-friendly, user-friendly Bitcoin accelerator that you can use or send it to your friends and family. If you're a Bitcoiner, you might have friends and family that are getting into Bitcoin. Send them my 5-step accelerator, and they will have trusted ways to get into Bitcoin safely and efficiently and cost effectively for them, that's going to take them along the correct path and not get them into the trading and altcoin world of all that craziness, right? If you want to help your family members and loved ones be able to go through their first Bitcoin cycle securely and safely with peace of mind, send it to them, right? That's why I'm creating it. For the folks watching this are new to Bitcoin to watch it, and for the veterans of Bitcoin that are here to send it to their loved ones, their friends and family. So no matter where you are on your Bitcoin journey, please get off zero, get some Bitcoin, think in first principles. Don't subject yourself to intellectual fallacies. And of course, once you get your Bitcoin, do not keep it in single points of failure. Do not keep it in the ETF. Do not keep it on exchanges. What you are doing, if you were doing that, is you are saying, oh my goodness, the meter based on the speed of light is better. I'm going to do that, but I'm going to derive it as a function of the meter based on the latitude around Earth, okay? If you have your Bitcoin in an ETF, the whole reason you own Bitcoin is because you do not trust human entities to manage the money supply. So why on earth do you trust human beings to manage the currency outside of human control? Okay, it is nonsensical to own Bitcoin in an ETF. It is nonsensical to own Bitcoin in an exchange. In the same way that Peter Schiff is being nonsensical for using the very arguments against himself, in the same way Peter is being a hypocrite of wanting to price Bitcoin in gold, but not price gold in Bitcoin, respectfully and lovingly to all of you. If you own Bitcoin in an ETF or on an exchange, you're being a hypocrite to yourself, and you have no right to laugh at Peter Schiff for not buying Bitcoin, because you bought Bitcoin, but you're being a hypocrite to yourself. I say that as lovingly as I can, because it is a matter of time until you're going to lose your Bitcoin. So please, get off zero when it comes to Bitcoin. Once you get off zero, understand the importance of self-custody, understand the importance of not having single points of failure in your self-custody. I highly encourage cloud custody multi-sig. I highly encourage you withdraw from exchanges, and I highly encourage you either do one of two things. Spend hundreds, if not over 1,000 hours learning about it yourself, or number two, hire somebody to help you through the process and turn 1,000 hours of work into 10 hours of work. Those are your two options. And if Bitcoin price starts to appreciate rapidly in terms of American political currency units and gold, what you're going to see is that the cost to hire somebody will skyrocket dramatically, and you will have no more time. So whatever you do, please buy Bitcoin. Please get off zero. Please check out the links in the description. Free resources for you to learn about. And ultimately, do not wait to take self-custody of your Bitcoin. Otherwise, you'll be laughed at, just like probably you're laughing at Peter Schiff.